Hello and welcome to Men in Progress, the podcast of United Methodist Men of Trietsch here in Flower Mound, Texas. We're part of the Life Plus God podcast series from Trietsch Memorial United Methodist Church. We drop a new podcast every Tuesday. Really appreciate you listening to this episode of Men in Progress. I'm your host, Dave Casey, and if you've listened to our podcast before, you know we're just a bunch of guys trying to be better men and live better lives in our walk with God, our families, and each other. In this episode of Men in Progress, we're discussing a sensitive topic that, frankly, none of us enjoy talking about. The truth is, none of us ever get married thinking things won't work out, but statistically, about half the time, they don't. Currently in America, somewhere between 35 and 50% of all marriages end in divorce. For second marriages, that number goes up to 60%. And Christians aren't immune from divorce. In fact, because of our faith, I think divorce can be even harder on Christian couples because of the spiritual commitments we make when we get married. But faith can also be the thing that gets us through and helps us heal after a divorce. Joining me to discuss how faith gets us through divorce are three of my fellow brothers from Trietsch, Bill Park, Rich Fulton, and Michael Castleberry. So, guys, welcome to Men in Progress.
Oh, happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming. This is not an easy one. So, we're not talking football tonight, although we'll probably get onto that subject, we always do. So, first of all, I really want to tell you how much I appreciate you being here, because truly this is a difficult, sensitive subject when we talk about divorce, and particularly in relationship to Christianity. That Christian men and women have, I think, a particular challenge with this. So I'm just going to say, probably just kind of something I referred to at the top is when you were going through your divorce, did your faith make that process harder, easier, or both? I don't know. Rich, is there a factor that faith played in this?
Absolutely. For me, it made it easier, definitely made it easier, but it was still hard.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So making it easier doesn't mean it made it easy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So faith was of a help to you.
It was a definite help for me.
Yeah. I'll do that. Bill, I'll ask you the same thing.
I'm going to say both, because I think I was very unhappy for a long time, and the reason I stayed in the marriage was part of it was my faith, and I felt like the commitment I made to God, the commitment I'd made to the family.
Yeah.
That's what kept me in. And then before I got divorced, we weren't going to church, because when you're in a dysfunctional marriage, it's very hard to be in public with your wife.
Yeah.
And so the first place I went when I moved out of the house was back to church.
Back to church.
So that made it better, made it easier for me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Michael, do you really feel like when you got divorced, did that challenge your faith?
You know, I don't know if the divorce challenged my faith. When I think faith and church, I kind of separate those two a little bit. Yep. And my former spouse worked at the church. So there was a little awkwardness here at Trietsch that's just natural. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm a product of divorced parents, and they had faith in front of us. I was young, so I don't know anything but divorced parents. But faith was always there. So, it was it was just kind of a little bit more natural. So my faith was always there. And I've always separated faith from the church. For me, church just kind of invigorated my faith.
Well, church is the people too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, church is the people and the circle of friends and all that. And faith is a little bit different.
Absolutely. So my faith, I just still, same old questions you would ask God, and make me better and be a good father and don't take anybody down with you type of stuff, right? Yeah. And then the brothers that I have here is what really helped me out, right? There's no doubt that brotherhood, kept me away from myself, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely so. So, Rich, I'm going to ask you, are there times that you actually drew strength from your faith during the process? And I know you've been divorced more than once.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know how many times you want to go into, but
well, I've been in this business a few times, so yes.
Okay.
Say the question again, Dave.
So, are there times that you drew maybe even an unexpected strength from your faith during the process of kind of this angst of going through a divorce, which is
I think
tough.
so, because I started my Christian journey. I was raised in the church, but I really started my Christian journey in my early 20s. So I had built some reservoir of faith there. It was it did give me strength. I remember people would worry about me sometimes about because of the loneliness and something, but and there was times with those. That was one of the tough parts. Maybe
Sure.
we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But I always thought to myself, a Christian's really never alone. I mean,
Amen.
I always felt like I could call upon God, and it may sound corny, but
Yep.
there was always that companion with me that I could fall back on when I was getting kind of down. So I think it did give me strength.
Yeah, super. So kind of a tie into that, Bill, is what role did prayer play in the whole process when you were going? And I know it's a process. It's not like, okay, one day we just decide to get divorced and we're done. It's a long time coming in most cases, I know.
In my case, it was a long time coming, and there was a lot of prayer, and there was marriage counseling, and then there was a lot of prayer and things, and finally you get to the point where you realize it's time.
Yeah.
And a lot of prayer before I made that decision, and then a lot of prayer once I stepped out into divorce.
So definitely helpful from your
helpful,
standpoint,
yes.
and do that. Yeah. So, Mike, when you went through this, what was your relationship with God? Did it change at all throughout that whole process?
I don't know. I've always looked at my relationship with God as he's my consultant. I know I'm so pragmatic, it gets me in trouble and helps me sometimes, to be quite honest, that, my relationship is that don't lose sight of what's important. Own what was your fault and move on, right? And still be the good father. So my North Star was be a good father, because I had middle school sons, sure. And it was not their fault. So that was kind of my North Star, and it kind of kept me grounded. Yeah. And then my relationship with God and my prayer was, give me discernment and let me mature as the father they need, and not let the divorce penetrate that as best as I could. Yeah. I mean, it's challenging, but
it's different. But I have the I won't call this an advantage, but I have the perspective, I guess, of knowing, your ex-spouse, same with Rich and same with Bill. So it's a scenario that, and I know you guys are, family oriented, that the relationship with your kids just transcends this. And I think that's almost a whole nother topic when we get through it. But I know that's an important role for each of you guys, in making sure that. So do you think your relationship, relationship with God is any different now that time has passed since you were divorced? Rich, have you seen that at all, or has it been a constant?
It certainly is from my early youth when I went through a divorce, but I don't think so much was different this last time.
Right.
I pretty much think it's the same. My faith is there, and it helped me a lot because there were lots of, when you go through a divorce, even if you've done it before, it's a lot of uncharted water.
Sure.
There's a lot of surprises. There's a lot, and as men, at least me, you like to think you're in control. I can fix this, I can handle this, and I was constantly getting surprised with left field things, new situations, and my faith helped me because I could do the best I could, make the best decision I could with good intentions, and kind of turn it over to God.
Yeah.
And that gave me peace. I don't know, that might have made a decision better, but it gave me some peace in the process.
That's a great perspective, I guess. So, Bill, have you thought about, what do you think and I've never been divorced, so I'm probably a good one to ask this question, I guess. What's the greatest misconception people have, you think, when it comes to divorce?
I really don't know, because like Mike, I grew up with divorced parents from a young age, so that's what I knew. I know when I got married, I said, I'm never going to do that. When I get married, I'm staying married for life. And
determined. Yeah.
It didn't work out that way.
Yep. Yeah. There's always factors.
So I'm not sure what other people's misconception is, I guess.
Yeah, I think that some people think it's going to be better on the other side, and it may be, depending on why you got divorced. But if you just have one of those vanilla divorces that'll never become a Lifetime movie like mine, it's challenging. And you look at the current state of your world, not thinking about the boys are going to grow up, and you have split custody, and it's kind of like you can't hold them to say you need to hang out with me because I only get you every other weekend. They got to live their lives, work their jobs. So,
when there's communication, I mean, there's financial things. There's a lot of things that play into that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast. The financial, when I talk to men who come to me who are struggling, I'm an advocate for staying married and go to counseling. If that counselor don't work, go to another counselor. And if that one doesn't work, go to another. But if the die is cast, the money you can make, again, just get as much time as you can with your children. And so those are the things that you just don't think about on the other side of divorce, right? And, and it's a lonely existence when you got a house full of rugrats just stepping on Legos. You don't step on Legos as much, when they're not in the house. Because I had middle schoolers when we divorced.
Yeah. So, Bill, I know that you did something very deliberate around that, as far as keeping in contact with your kids. You might share that with us.
Yeah. Well, with a little bit of difference, at the time I got divorced, I had one in high school and two off in college. So it was a little bit different situation, and the one in high school just had a year and a half left. But what I did, I started on Sunday nights calling it Sunday DAD, dinner at Dad's. And I would cook dinner. The kids were invited. Whoever they're dating or friend, bring somebody. And then the other thing, I think when I was after going through the divorce, I wanted to start from a place of love. Everyone got a hug when they came in, boyfriends, girlfriends, all the kids, and a big hug when they left. So I was trying to create a different atmosphere on purpose. And the dinner at Dad's was fun because it would be, I'd cook whatever their favorite was or requests or whatever was coming up, and then play games, talk, whatever we did after that. And it was a fun Sunday evening.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I remember you doing that, and that just struck me. That was very deliberate parenting on your part, which I thought was outstanding. I mean, just really, really, really great. So, Rich, I throw the easy questions to them. The tough ones are going.
That was the easy question.
Okay. So sometimes I've encountered. I'm sure you guys never have, but I've encountered some judgmental Christians over the years that said, "Oh, you're divorced. Well, that's a big black mark, and how can you call yourself a Christian?" and so on. Have you run into that attitude anywhere?
Well, I've run into aspects of. I wouldn't call it judgmental, and this may be sound weird, but I did find out, or I felt like that a lot of my married couple friends, because when you're married, a lot of your social world is other married couples, and most of them, even the men, not just the women, it was like I had a virus and they didn't want to catch it.
Wow. Yeah.
So they weren't being mean, or it wasn't intended to be hurtful, but it's like the avoidance of me. It literally is like you felt like I've got COVID and, let's go hang out, and they don't want to hang out with you. Yeah. And so
it's like a circle of trust.
Yeah, it was I know it wasn't intentional, but it almost felt like I was isolated because the married people didn't want to be around me.
Right.
And that was hard. That was kind of unexpected, actually. I kind of expected the wives to cut, but the guys that I knew that I hung out with and did things with, played golf with or whatever, they kind of were like, and I don't, like I said, it wasn't intentional. It was just, they were uncomfortable, I think, around me. Yeah.
Well, and again, that's, I know people are in a situation there where we're having a party. Who are we going to invite, right? And
can't
one or the other. It's going to be one or the other.
That's real.
That's real.
That's real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of work through that, and I guess that gets you into different social circles once you.
Well, what happens is you get three rings. You got those guys that through thick or thin, you could be broke down in Anchorage and they'll get you home.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to get you home. And then you have the ones that were just kind of indifferent. And then there were the ones that you know, I don't know, they felt they had to pick sides, even though the divorce did not warrant that. Not all divorces are, you know, I mean, I get it, but it's just a natural thing. And you just got to let time run its course, you know. But that's kind of what I saw, you know, the ones that, but, you know, at the age of which we got the divorce, people start separating anyway. Kids are no longer involved in youth as much, and they grow up, and a lot of our bonding was with youth.
Sure. Yeah, and as the kids change, I know you guys went through football. You know, my guys were in the Marcus band and went through stuff. So it's like your circle of friends somewhat changes too, depending on what the kids are doing.
So you got to balance. Is it me? Was it, you know? So, or life just in general.
So, Bill, we talked earlier about prayer. So, you know, as you were going through all this, were there any other spiritual practices that really helped you or were, I guess, important to you through that?
Yeah, I think when I went going through the divorce again, the first thing I did was show up at Trietsch.
Yeah.
And so I let people know, you know, like I joined a Sunday school class, I joined the men's group, and I can be somewhat introverted. And so I made a promise to myself to just say yes. When someone asks you to do something, say yes. Yeah. And that wasn't necessarily a spiritual practice, but I was active in a lot of things at Trietsch. And by the way, I had time.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you're surrounding yourself with positive people, I guess.
I was, particularly in the men's group, I think I've surrounded myself with a great group of men. And I think that period between divorce and before I started dating and remarried, you get a chance to redefine yourself.
Yeah.
And think about the man you want to be.
Kind of question how you spend your time. Right. Who you spend it with.
Yeah, because I think before I got divorced, I wasn't the man I wanted to be. Yeah. Because I was very unhappy. Coming out of that, you can redefine that and you get another chance.
That's awesome. Yeah. Not everybody can do that. You know, I know some folks that kind of went down in flames and never really came back, you know, which is difficult, very difficult. So, Rich, do you have any words of advice? I know you always have words of advice, so this is like a loaded question, but you know, for a man of faith who are struggling and even considering divorce, you know, what counsel would you give them?
I think I would echo what's already been said. There are stereotypes about divorce, especially for men, and people didn't realize that there's all kinds of different scenarios. You just don't know, so it's no cookie cutter thing. But I would say, in general, you know, somebody slap you upside the head if you're thinking, and surely here are the problems, here are the things that aren't working, so I want out. Yeah. Well, somebody just slapped me upside the head and said, well, sit down and think that through a little bit, because you think the grass is going to be greener. It's probably not over time. Yep. And work harder, try harder, do whatever you have to do. Give it the last-ditch effort to try to make it work, because you got together for a reason. Yep. So there's something there. And it may have drifted or something, you know, got crossways. But if you can fix it, that's far better than the divorce for most situations. Now, not every. Sometimes it's better to end it. Oh yeah. But I would say that would be my advice for guys, and seek out people to talk to about it. You know.
And Michael, you kind of alluded to this. That was kind of your advice too, to try everything you can to make it work one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, when men come to me, it's amazing on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being a really big problem, and 1, they're all the same weight to these guys, because that's what they're dealing with. And this is their love of their life at one point. And they have children together, and many of them come from divorced families, you know, like we have. And you really put up with a lot of things that you didn't think you would have to keep it together. And, you know, but so I tell them, slug it out, because I think some of them come to me thinking I'm their out. And I'll go, no, you know, you need to stick this out, man. I mean, I'm telling you, I would have stayed married if I thought it would work. Yeah. And then I start telling them the ramifications of divorce. Yeah. I mean, you know, not only how it rips your soul and the isolation and the challenges with your faith, but the financial. I mean, you know, those are real. Those are real. Yeah. And so I encourage them. And then and you're going to have to eat some pride. I mean, you just got to, if that's the goal, what's it going to take? Yeah. And, sometimes
particularly
it's
when you've got multiple stakeholders. It's not just two of you. I mean, there's kids, there's family, there's a lot more at stake as well.
Yeah, that's right. Because, I was about to be 50, 18 and a half years, middle school kids. My situation was, somebody listening to this podcast could have no children. Yeah. That's a little different conversation. Or empty nested. That's a different conversation, right? Still, there's scars, and kids are going to be impacted on that second example. So
definitely so. Bill, you were nodding through some of this. It sounds like people have come to you for advice.
I'm going to go the other way around. I went to a friend that had been recently divorced. I had two good friends, one recently divorced, and another good friend that we met for lunch all the time. And thinking, especially the divorce guy was going to give me the hall pass. Oh yeah, you need to get divorced. Get just the opposite.
Really?
Stick it out. Work at it. Yeah. And going back to, if anyone came to me, I would say the same thing.
Yeah. It's worth investing in if you can until the last moment when you can't. I guess is kind of what I'm hearing.
So when I tell them, I'll tell the guys, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. One thing I had to tell my father, broke his heart, and tell my boys we were getting divorced.
Yeah. That's
hard.
That was a question I was going to ask when kids are involved. I mean, and they're different ages. Like your guys were in middle school. You had almost adult children, when you went through a Bill. And I know, Rich, your kids are much older.
Yeah. Well, yes, but if you dial me back to a previous divorce, my kids were young, and so that was a major. It would whatever we said about sticking it out. If you've got kids still at a young age, I mean, double down on it.
Yeah.
You may not be able to, but I had a lawyer one time talk to me back then about the ramifications, and when it comes to custody and get ready to be Uncle Dad, and I had to stop and think about that. And once I was there, I understood the just Wednesday and weekends or every other weekend and the going back and forth and
just a separation. Yeah,
that's real, men who are listening. That is real,
and I can. Fortunately, I never got to this point, but I can remember before this thinking when I would see fathers that would drift away from their children after a divorce and not stay in touch, I could say, how could a father do that? But sometimes to me, it was very painful to have the temporary dad thing.
Yeah.
And I could kind of understand why some dads
get out of the way.
It was so painful to be that in and out of their life that they would prefer to not. And so it's going to take some effort, and I would encourage any dad, if they're even thinking about that, if they have to be a divorced dad, double down and making that, like Bill was saying, he went to extra efforts.
Yeah. And
I've known people that sometimes you have to go to extra efforts to make sure you stay in their lives.
Sure.
Even sometimes if they don't want you to be.
Yeah.
And times have changed. I mean, even since I was divorced, that the dads, especially if they're very present, they get a little bit more favorable consideration. Fight for that 50-50, right? And, even if it costs a little more money, you can make more money. I mean, again, another podcast. One thing I also want to add is on the other side of divorce, if you're going to do the divorce, invest in yourself on why you got divorced the first time and work on that before you do it again.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying even in your note, 60% of second marriages, and I'm not shooting. I haven't gotten remarried because I'm a little gun shy, right? And so I can't emphasize whatever that it is, right? And we're all products of our upbringing and the attachment styles and all that. I mean, it's amazing how I was so anti-psychology, and then all this happened, and I'd pray to God, and God would throw this stuff at me, and I go, "You're killing me, man." But
that was in Psych 101.
Yeah, I mean, it was man.
I would echo that. Reinvest and try to understand you more.
Mm-hmm.
My wise old mother once gave me some advice about. Sometimes divorce is a little bit like running away from your problems, right? And she looked at me one day and says, the trouble with running away from your problems is you have to take yourself with you. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not really focusing on what did you do, what could you have done different, what about you made it, I mean, it's hard to do that kind of introspection, but that's a good exercise to go through to try to avoid just doing it again.
And guys that are against going to psychiatry or psychology or whatever, we all know, we had our issues. You were either brought up and, you were bullied or, whatever it was, or you have dad or mom. I mean, we know. It's not that hard.
I don't need that. I don't need that. I can fix
it.
I can
so go to a life coach. That's what I did. I went to a life coach because, again, my North Star was, I'm going to still be the dad I want to be.
Sure.
But I could no longer be a dictating father. I had to be an advisor. And my relationship now, as many of you will laugh when I say this, I have 2 college-age kids, and they ask for my advice. If I just give it, it's not listened to. And the other is very transactional. Yeah. So, it's either, Dad, this is going to cost this. So, but then that helped me be a better me for whoever that next person.
Sure.
And pray for her, whoever that may be one day. So,
okay, so we kind of went through my questions, but I just want to throw it out there, kind of a jump ball. If you guys have anything else that you want to talk about that you've thought about during our conversation.
Yeah, there was one thing I wanted to talk about. When I got divorced, soon after that, my 2 girls were in town mostly, and my son was off at college, summer school. And several times asked him, is there anything you want to talk to me about? If you want to know about the divorce, or if you want to talk to me about how you feel about it, please let me know. And it took a year, and I spent a year feeling like I thought I was the bad guy that broke up the family. So I felt really bad.
So their silence
silence kind of hurt me.
Yeah.
But individually on car rides with my girls, we're driving around one girl, and then within weeks the next girl. What a sense of forgiveness when they told me how they felt.
Oh, wow.
And
that it just took them time to process, it sounds like.
It took them time to process. They were uncomfortable talking about it. My son has always been very tight with his feelings, so he's never really said much about it. But the 2 girls, at least you had a perspective that, okay, they didn't think I was the bad guy.
Yeah.
They saw that there were problems. And
yeah, super.
Yeah, I would just say that, the first 6 months is just such a shock to your system. And you go through the ebbs and flows of being mad, lonely. Should we reconcile? God, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, it's almost a grief process.
Yeah, you got to go through that. And 6 months, a year, I just encourage the men listen to this, and even the women that may listen to this, don't give up on your faith. Now, you may not read a scripture every day. You may fall asleep in the middle of your prayer, whatever. You're not as intentful, whatever that is. Don't turn your back on it. And don't find excuses to turn your back on it, because you're going to find solace in it once you heal. Whatever, the faith is I think faith is always going to help us heal, but just give it a little time and, redefine what faith means to you. Maybe it's not going to church with a family, or maybe it's, going to a Bible study or going to a new church, whatever that is, but on your own time. I just don't turn your back on it,
I would say the biggest thing that comes to mind is, as I mentioned, I was surprised. I always thought of myself as a strong person. I'm good by myself. So I didn't anticipate that the loneliness, because of my social group was so integrated and they disappeared.
Like immediately.
At how hard that was for me. And I thought this wasn't supposed to be, that loneliness part wasn't supposed to be hard. Yeah. And fortunately, I had some people that could fill that gap. But a lot of men won't ask. And a lot of men don't have that readily available, especially they don't ask part. And so I would just encourage, if you know somebody who's going through a divorce, don't wait for them to reach out. Just somebody to go have a cup of coffee with or have dinner with or something, and just listen. I think that can be a big help to a lot of guys going through that process.
You got to be a lot more proactive. Hey, give me a call if you want.
And take baby steps too, because the relationship changed for them too. It's not going to be like you just get right back at it. And take baby steps. Don't unload or whatever. Just take whatever it allow. Because I completely agree with that. Absolutely.
I can remember that, like coming to Trietsch when you're coming by yourself.
Yeah.
And just saying, get through that awkwardness because you come here, you don't know anybody. Keep going, keep going. You had to keep coaching yourself to get through that so that you could.
And volunteer like you did. I mean, I kept doing youth, and I got strength through the knucklehead youth, and it's which they've always done, and so and then it's also important that your children, especially your children, that see you not miss a beat with what was once important to you. It's still important to you. Why would I quit doing youth, right? Yep. So. Part of the reason why I keep going to church and doing this as an example, because who knows what's going to happen to the children I have. So anyway, I think that really helps as a good distraction. And then it helps the people in your support group go, okay, this isn't as different as Michael's not as different as maybe we think, you know.
Married people need to, especially married men, reach out to that guy going through divorce. You realize it's not contagious. It's not
absolutely
a virus, It'll be fine.
Absolutely.
Be fine.
Not contagious. Well, that's good. That's good advice, Rich. I'm gonna have 3 ladies in, I think, for the next podcast. Michael, we need to make a note of this. So we'll see how all that fits together. Guys, man, I thank you so much for joining me on this. This is incredible. We could do a whole nother half hour just on the interaction with kids, because I think that's just as much a part of this, and do that. Well, again, thanks much, guys. I really appreciate your input. So there you have it, episode 18 of Men in Progress. We hope you enjoyed our conversation, and you'll join us again in July when our topic will be, how can I live my faith at work? Thanks again to Bill Park, Rich Fulton, and Michael Castleberry for joining me and sharing their wisdom with our listeners. And thanks again for listening to Men in Progress from Trietsch Memorial, UMC here in Flower Mound, Texas. I'm Dave Casey. We'll see you next time.
This episode of the Men in Progress podcast is sponsored by Trietsch Memorial United Methodist Church, where our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. If you're in or near Flower Mound, Texas on any Sunday morning, we would love to welcome you to any of the Trietsch services. Or you can follow our services anytime on our Facebook page or at tmumc.org.